welcome to The Sound of Design
with Mark
and Dan and
Emily.
Hey! Thank you so much for being with us on today's episode. We have our special guest, Emily Hughes with Lutron, who has graciously agreed to hang out with us and talk all things Lutron lighting. And if you're not familiar, you'll get a great overview today. And we're going to talk about some cool things that Lutron does specifically around lighting and shades. And they are such an incredible company. A lot of our vendors, we like to talk a big game about, and Lutron is no exception. To say that they are the first for so many things is not an exaggeration. And you probably had some form of a Lutron product in your life, in your experience, in some way, shape, or form, and had no idea that that's exactly what was going on. And so we are just so thrilled to have you here. We just cannot say thank you enough.
Oh, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So I figure we'll to just kind of kick it off. How did you get started working with Lutron? How did that journey happen? And just tell us, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so it all started back in college. I was a marketing major at the University of Tennessee. Go Vols.
There you go.
And there was a professional sales forum. It's now kind of merged and grown into a new organization now. But it was really great because there were a bunch of companies involved in that all had careers in professional sales for, seniors that were graduating. So I remember kind of getting the debrief on all the companies, and I was like, Lutron, that sounds kind of interesting. And then I ended up just not talking to them at the career fair or at anything. and one of my best friends, she and I took a ton of classes together and interned together, everything. And a guy from Lutron actually went and spoke in her class. And she was texting me and she was like, holy crap, Emily, like, you had a gut feeling about this company, like you need to get in contact with him. And so then I ended up, sending an email and being like, hey, like I'm interested. Are you still around? And then kind of the rest is history. I absolutely loved everyone I spoke to, and the company just seemed really neat. It's funny, I always go back and recruit just for our sales leadership development program. And, I tell all the students, I'm like, had you have told me when I was a senior in college that I would have, been super passionate about lighting controls, I would have been like, I don't even know what that means. Like, you are silly. So it's funny. I've kind of brainwashed all of my friends now that whenever they're on vacation, they're like, oh my gosh, here's a Lutron dimmer. And I'm like, yeah, look at that diva. Like, hope it's working great for you. So
that's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Well, and it's funny you mention it because it's one of those categories, lighting control just doesn't make sense. Like the word, once you understand what it is the simplest way to describe it. But unless you're really, more familiar with it, then it doesn't. And it's really about getting control over the light in the room, right? Is that a good way to say it? And, how do you think about lighting control? If you didn't use that terminology, how would you describe it?
Well, I guess it really depends on what you're trying to describe, because ultimately, the simplest way to describe it is like a dimmer.
Sure.
Everybody is familiar with like a dimmer, or, some people call it a dimmer switch. But, when we start looking into some of our higher end residential systems and our luxury systems, and you start talking about keypads, then it is more about, balancing certain lights and, still trying to dim some, have others brighter, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So I think in its simplest form, dimming is what people can really wrap their head around, but it depends on what you're wanting to establish within the space.
Yeah. One of the things that I kind of had to, still to this day, when you're talking with a client and maybe you'll bring it up at first, a lot of them immediately think, oh, well, I'm not lazy. I'll get up and I'll go flip the switch, right? So, yes, lighting control in a lot of cases gives you the ability to automate or control it off of a smart device. But I always kind of have to get people around that. Like, no, don't think of it as, oh, I'm lazy, I don't want to have to get up and hit a switch. Think that I can hit a button when I'm walking into the room that says vibe, because that's the cool word that everyone says nowadays. And it dims my lamps to a certain level. It brings other lights on around the house, or from a safety perspective, entry and exit points of the home. It's a big deal. You know, like you're able to set those scenes with the touch of a button or the touch of your screen. And it's, you know, honestly, one of my favorite things that I've ever gotten into in this industry. And, you know, we've done a lot of cool stuff.
We do a lot of cool things.
Well, I'm honored on behalf of Lutron. It's great.
And then, you know, kind of get outside of just light switches, right? Like, you all do shades. You know, I'm sure there's other things that we may not get into today, but like, that's forms of lighting control, not controlling a light bulb, but controlling the amount of outside light in the home, right?
Oh, yeah. And that's something super important, too, because, you know, when our founder was, you know, he really created this as an industry. You know, he developed what is lighting control by inventing that dimmer as we know it. So, you know, in the late 80s, when he was like, how can we call ourselves a lighting control company if we're not controlling the most powerful light in the world, the sun? Like, you can have as many dimmers as you want within your space, but if you have a ton of light pouring through your windows, then those dimmers really aren't going to do anything. So being able to create a good balance of that artificial and natural light is so important when you actually talk about, you know, lighting control and total light management. So
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things that I so appreciate about what Lutron does, is that you guys have this holistic approach, right? It's not just in, and it's hard to describe this, you know, so I'll give an example. You know, there's a lot of companies that will do one thing really well, right? And so they have maybe 5 or 6 things in the ecosystem, and those 5 or 6 things talk together and they work well together, and that's kind of where it ends. And by contrast, you could look at a RadioRA 3 system and realize there's 25 or 35 different components, and then there's subsets underneath that, and they all work together as a holistic ecosystem. And that's only possible if you are truly looking at the big picture. And that's something that you guys do so well. And that's something that not everybody else, quite frankly, always understands. And so we say it all the time, is like, good design is about understanding purpose. It's like that technology is going to follow purpose, and you guys have things that follow purpose. And so it makes sense once you start really digging into the nitty gritty of it and go, oh yeah, I need a remote control for this shade in this room, and I need those remote controls to look like little shade icons. So it's intuitive. I pick it up and I press a button, and I know exactly how to use the product without having to read a manual, without having to have a tech genius or my son or my neighbor kid, or, you know, nobody has to come over. There's like, it's just click and it works the way that you anticipate every single time. It's just absolutely incredible.
yeah. Well, and, you know, to steal a page out of a Sonance training I heard, like, nobody wants to operate their home. So being able to have things be simplistic, easy to understand, intuitive, you know, that's where there are so many considerations into every single product that gets launched, gets added, because you don't want to be like staring at a bunch of, you know, keypads or dimmers or remotes or anything and be like, I have no idea what this does. You know, let me just click everything to see what I need to make happen. You know, you want it to be very intuitive so that, you know, you tap something and it works and you don't even need to second guess it.
Yeah,
So.
For sure.
Well, so can you give us some of the history? You mentioned briefly that your founder had invented the dimmer. And I think that was like 60, 70 years ago, if I remember from the training. And so what are some of the things that you guys have done, you know, over the last, you know, I don't know, let's call it like 50 years or so. Some of the categories that you guys have started to pioneer that really have made lighting control what it is today.
Yeah. I mean, so 1959, he invented that Capri dimmer, and then 1961, Lutron was founded. So this will be our 63rd year around.
Wow.
Yeah, so just a few. But when we talk about kind of the industry and when we talk about just different things that we have launched, starting from just those analog dimmers to then getting into the world of smart home, starting to create systems. And, a lot of that is done because we ask for a lot of feedback and we are the leader in the industry. So we're able to kind of have an idea of where the trajectory is going to go. And before, anybody else does it, like we can be like, okay, this is the path that we need to go down right now. So, from the invention of HomeWorks and RadioRA and, adding shades into our portfolio and, even on the commercial side, like it's really cool. I don't know too much about the commercial side of our business, but from what I hear, I mean, I remember even during our development training program, like as far as whole commercial systems and solutions go, like for code and other stuff like that, like Lutron is really, I think, one of the only companies that's poised to even do that. So it's cool when you think about outside of just a single dimmer for your dining room. If you're doing a, 600 square foot apartment, wanting it to be smart, if you're doing a 50,000 square foot home, if you're doing a whole college campus, like we're really able to do any and all of those solutions, which I think is really cool and really powerful that we've been able to establish ourselves in all of those areas.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you said it too. And, the purpose of our podcast really isn't the commercial side, but I can't tell you the number of times that I walk into a church or a or a college, or I'm at a concert or something, and I'm looking at the wall, and you sort of go, "Oh, yep, that's Lutron. Oh, yep. They've got a graphic eye over there, and oh, look at that. There's a Lutron dimmer switch in the bathroom, and here's an automated one like at a gas station, and like, and that's why that's what I'm saying. It's like it's so massive of a thing. So let's maybe dive down a little bit, a little drill down. If you were to introduce someone for, say, a single room or maybe a couple of rooms, what part of your lineup would you look at? And maybe give us an overview of where you would kind of start, just sort of wrapping your brain around lighting control.
Yeah. So it's a little bit tough to specifically pinpoint that to a single solution because, the first step when we talk about our residential systems and really that entry level starting point would be with our Caseta wireless solution. Mm-hmm. Now, with that being said, some people may want to only do a room or two and want to look into our RadioRA solution. Because it's not like a one size fits all. And because both of those are retrofit capable, I think it really depends on if people, asking some more questions. So like, what are you wanting to accomplish by having some smart devices in this space? Would it be valuable for multiple things to be affected from a button press? Just to understand, like, would it be valuable to do hybrid keypads and go the RadioRA route, even including our new tape light, like maybe there are applications for that, especially in like places like a kitchen. Like if you're doing it in a kitchen, maybe you would want to go down that path of RadioRA. However, if you're wanting it just to be kind of like simple, basic, kind of getting your feet wet with lighting control with a space or two, that's where Caseta is a really great solution for those areas. So,
well, that's awesome. And I'm glad you mentioned it because that's what I was hoping to say is it's a good starting point, right? But obviously there's so much more capable when you get to a proper home platform that, you definitely have to look at what the goals are for a room, like you said, and kind of take it from there. So what are some of the things that you guys have seen people do and some of the reasons maybe why you would shift from a Caseta into a RA? You mentioned the tape light. What is that, and what is it that does specific that's different than the rest of your lineup?
Yeah. So to kind of backpedal a tiny bit, Caseta is honestly great, even as far as capabilities go, as far as integration, as far as styles, as far as even different picos and stuff like that. So, that's a really great place for most people, I would say, to start. When we do take that look into RadioRA and when we look at the tape light was a really exciting addition that we launched back at CEDIA in September. And that's something that, when you look at, I know I've kind of skipped over RAW 2 Select. That's almost in between Caseta and RadioRA 3. But when you look at both of those, you're only really talking about the actual controls on the wall, the Pico remotes, and then the conversation about shades. Now with RAW 3, with this tape light, you can incorporate that electric light aspect into it too, which I think is really cool. And typically, if you're trying to incorporate lighting and especially tape light, like that can be really, really difficult to do in systems. So now having it be native to Lutron, dimmed down to 0.1%, tunable white, 2 different color temperature ranges. Now that's an even more powerful story, whether you're wanting it to be a little bit brighter in a kitchen or you're wanting it to be kind of a cool little like fun factor for maybe around a TV or around a mirror in the bathroom and having it be warmer. So I think that really helps, on top of a few other things that I've mentioned already, really separate RadioRA from Caseta and RAW 2 Select.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the kitchen, and I'm glad you mentioned the color temperature. And so for folks who are listening and may not be familiar, color temperature refers to kind of the tone or the color, right, of what that light is. It's more yellow, or if it's going to be more like a pure white. And I'm reminded of a story. We had a client who did RadioRA 2, a whole house, and their kitchen fixture was back ordered. Okay. So we go through this entire job and we're talking maybe 6 or 8 different rooms on the main floor and then 4 or 5 rooms upstairs. And I mean, the whole thing, right? We did the whole shebang, and they install the fixture and the light in the kitchen, and it is this pure, cool light. Okay. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like almost blue. And the rest of the house had all warm tone. And so they walk into the kitchen and they just like, you almost got sick being in that space because the temperature was weird. Like it didn't match the rest of the house. And not to say that one was better or worse, but just to say that like it makes a big difference as to your comfort level when you walk into that space for the temperature to be where you want it to be, where you're comfortable with it. And that really does change the way that you're going to feel about your home. Do I want to be here, or do I feel uncomfortable? And does that make me want to bounce, right? Yep. And go somewhere else? And it's like, no, I want my home to be comfortable. I want it to be nice and where I want to enjoy, my space. So, so the tape light is available for RAW 3. Mm-hmm. What are
and HomeWorks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So what is the idea behind the RAW 3 instead of Caseta? You mentioned that it could do shades as well. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
So within Caseta, you can do shades with that, just, making sure that you have the proper hub there. But, if you do make that shift to RAW, then, that almost makes it easier that you don't have to worry, do I have the right hub? Do I not? Because it's just a processor living in the world of RAW 3. But as far as battery powered shades, hardwired shades, the world is kind of your oyster so long as you have the right equipment and stuff like that for both systems. So
yeah, and I mean I've run a Caseta system. It was one of the first things that we put in our house when my wife and I bought our house like 6 years ago. And we bought some honeycomb shades that integrated directly into Caseta. And it was, again, one of the best purchases I've ever made for the home to this day. Just being able to walk home or walk up, pull in the driveway at night, lights be on, my shades have gone down. But in the morning, at sunrise, I can have them come up so I can look outside, peek on the neighbors, make sure they're good, because my wife says I like to, I'm that neighbor. But One of my first projects when I got into this industry was a whole home RA 2 system with Savoya QS wireless.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I learned is that once we jumped up to theirs, it did kind of at the time unlock more fabric options and a couple other things because they were all run off of, I know I said wireless, controlled wirelessly, but these were hardwired shades.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that kind of separates the shade lines between Caseta and RA other than, I know Caseta is typically just battery powered, but you got more fabric lines? Are there anything else that might be different?
So if you have, and I know this is Lutron has lingo out the wazoo. I think we could have our own dictionary.
Yep.
But if you have the regular hub, you can have our Serena line.
Yep.
If you have the Pro hub, then that's where you can do battery powered, hardwired with with wireless communication. And that's where if you do the hardwired version as opposed to the battery, you get a lot more options.
Yep.
So that's where you're really unlocking, drapery tracks, horizontal sheer blinds. We have like a Venetian wood blind that you can do like an automated lift and an automated tilt. There are a couple more lines that you unlock should you go the wired route.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I didn't realize that you guys had wooden pieces that would shift and move up and down. Like, so you're saying like it's a wooden slat shade that is fully automated.
Yep. Yeah. And we initially launched that into the product offering and then got a lot of feedback that most people were like, we just kind of leave our wood blinds down and just use the tilt function. So that's where we launched the triathlon wood blind. That's a manual lift and then an automated tilt. So
got it. That makes a lot more sense now because I swear I've stared at your website sometimes and I'm going like, all right, I'm sure that there's a difference here, but sometimes like you're not really 100%. So that's awesome. That's very, very cool.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is we just recently, within the past couple of years, got a marketing team. So a lot of our websites have been getting revamped. So hopefully that should make it a little bit easier to navigate those websites too.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, we appreciate having folks like you to support us. It makes a huge difference. So, I know we just recently met you, 2 or 3 months ago at most, or actually probably a little further along, but it was through a Teams call. So not as personal, but
yeah. And now y'all can't shake me.
No,
I know.
You live here.
Well, it has been genuinely fantastic to have a knowledgeable rep to ask questions. And so you guys just do an incredible job. So just want to say thanks again for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, tell me a little bit about then the difference between what you would be able to do from a RA 3 to a HomeWorks, because we mentioned it, and that's kind of one of those where we have a lot of listeners that, they sort of get into lighting control, and I think, there are some who are pretty familiar with Caseta. They can, be pretty comfortable there. And RA 3, obviously, if you're going to do a whole house, like it's an immediate, okay, I want to do my whole house with smart lighting, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go there. Why would I switch and go into, say, HomeWorks? What's the thing that they do differently than, say, RA 3 or Caseta?
So one of the big driving factors for HomeWorks is the difference of keypads. So it's a little bit more design focused and oriented. So you have some new aesthetics, you have some different finishes. So that's really one of the big things is you're having more of that conversation. From like a technology standpoint, that's where, you really kind of go from that retrofit solution to you're probably talking more of like a gut renovation or a new construction project where you can actually, run low voltage wires to the keypads and it's like a panelized solution. So it's a little bit different from like from a behind the scenes perspective. But when you get into that, it's, our highest end, our luxury residential solution when we talk through our different systems, but you tend to be having more of the what style keypad would you like? Okay. And what finish? Like, what would you like this engraved with more than anything?
Interesting. So it's more about making sure that the look and the feel of the keypad on the wall is correct. It's less about the lighting. And I'm assuming then that that conversation, you said that it starts with new constructions, and you mentioned a word panelized. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about like what that is, just conceptually, like not model number specific, obviously, but just like what's the idea behind a panelized system as opposed to, say, a more traditional light switch system?
Yeah. So really kind of the difference there is instead of everything just running to like a breaker, it's just kind of running to that panel. And then there's that like low voltage. Well, there's the low voltage wire that then runs to the different spaces to manage the lights and the loads. So it's just a little bit different as far as, you're not as worried about, okay, let me have 5 switches here. I need to replace all 5 of them. It's more so, okay, we're going to have a single gang keypad or 2 gang. And then, okay, we press this button. What lights do we want to be affected by that? So it's just kind of like the way that the lights are wired is a little bit different.
Got it.
Because I've been in several houses where you'll go in and even new construction and there's like 8 light switches, right? And it's like,
oh yeah,
okay, who's going to stand here for 30 seconds figuring out what light they want to turn on, right? So what you're saying is instead of having that, all of those
wall
wires,
acne.
all that wall acne is going to get taken away and put into that panel. So that's essentially all of your lighting fixtures wire back to the panel. And then you just have that single beautiful designer keypad in that location.
Yep. Exactly. So again, when you're talking about HomeWorks, you're really wanting that like top line as far as customization, as far as capabilities, features, integration, all of that stuff. But like, it's interesting because you want it to be super technical, like from a capability standpoint, but very easy to use and very intuitive from a end user perspective. So it's an interesting balance of making it be so complex from a what's possible, but then, somebody is like, oh, I can click the vibe button and I know exactly what it's going to do when I click that,
Yeah.
So it's really cool. I've seen some very creative things in the world of HomeWorks that, it's just very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I've been in a few homes where, you talk about seeing, those bank of 8 switches, and my, aha moment sort of came when I went into one and I saw P-Touch label on each one of those switches.
Oh, no.
And like it had been done a few years ago. And so they started to like wear off and there was like dirt behind them. And it was like kind of gross. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, this is a $2.5 million house. And you got to like touch these gross switches like every single time. And like, that is just not at all, I think, what the homeowner had intended for. But in the end, like, we started swapping some things out. And I think at that point we had done, they had done I want to say it was a graphic eye.
Okay.
And I think it was like, we were able to get 6 switches down to 1 single unit. And it was like, so much cleaner, so much easier to use. And, you press a button and then everything just went the way that it was supposed to. And I think most people kind of use their lights that way. Like you kind of set it once you kind of figure out, like, I like this light at say, 60 or 70%. And I like this one at, and once you sort of set those levels, you kind of just want to go back to it. You don't want to have to sit there and every single time manually adjust those in order to get the lighting exactly where you want it. So I like the fact that you have that automation capability to just go click and it's done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the convenience element is so big at play there, and even what we've realized, there's kind of been like a shift in a trend within the industry as far as, 10, 20 years ago, what people typically did with keypads was, you had a good old 6-button raise lower C-touch keypad and you had your recess lights, your sconces, your under cabinet, like every single zone was independently, labeled and programmed that way. And a zone is essentially, for those that don't know what that is, it's pretty much like if you were to turn on a light switch, like a analog light switch, like what lights turn on. That's kind of like a zone of lighting. So we found, though, that, typically if you're going into a space, you're going in there for so many different reasons. Like if you're going into your kitchen, you're going in there to cook, you're going in there to dine, you're going in there maybe to prepare, and whenever you go into that space, you're always going to want the lights to be a certain way, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Same with a living room. If you're going in there to do a puzzle, you're going to want the lights a lot brighter than if you're going in to watch a movie versus if you have friends over. Like those are three completely different environments that you're going to be curating. And lights play a huge role in that. So, instead of having it be every single zone is a different button, now with, the keypads, we found people typically doing scenes. So why, when you think about, I know we were laughing about the vibe scene, but like when we talk about having there be an entertained scene, like what lights do you want to do what? So that way you're not having to go over there and, dim this up, dim this down, because that gets labor intensive and annoying, quite frankly, and nobody wants to have to do that. So being able to have it do exactly what you're wanting it to do by that use of a scene. And I know that some people get a little bit scared about that because they're like, oh, but what if I want my sconces to be a little bit brighter? Okay, well, you can still go in your app. You can brighten them. If you want to talk to Alexa, you can have her brighten them. There's still a lot of ways that if you, for some reason, want those to be brighter, you may not be able to do that from the keypad on the wall, but you can still adjust those lights. You're not going to have to call an electrician to come out there and do anything crazy. So,
yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the idea of the entertain scene, because that's one that I just did a walk for a guy, and he says, we entertain a lot, and he started going into some of the things that he was doing, and there was going to be essentially a bar area over here, and then he's got another area over here, inside kitchen, outside kitchen, pool bar, and so he's got 5 TVs in all these different locations. And you start thinking about the lighting in that space, and it's like, yeah, if I'm going to have an adult style party and it's going to be an evening, okay, I'm going to adjust all sorts of things very, very differently than if I'm going to have a graduation party, right, or a family get together and we're in the pool and it's a Saturday afternoon and all those. It's like those are, so even the word entertain, right? It's like, well, what do you mean by entertain? Let's dive into that scene a little bit. Let's think about how you're going to use the space, and let's give you those options to be able to do that.
Absolutely. I think asking those questions is so critical because, to your point, everybody views things differently. So, the good thing is we can do it. Just let us know what you're trying to accomplish, how you're wanting to use the space, and then we'll make sure that that's exactly how you want it. And if tweaks need to be made, okay, cool. We'll go in and make those changes.
Yeah. So you mentioned the app. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's different? Because I know 20 years ago, app-based lighting was not really a very popular thing. We'll say it that way. So what are some of the things that you can do with the app that's different now than maybe lighting systems in the past?
Yeah. So the app has so many different cool features and capabilities. I think just being able to turn, your lights on or off in general is really cool. But if you want your lights to be at 47%, you can go in and it's at 1% increments. Same with our shades. You can put it at like a very definitive number. But going past that, we have scenes. So if you wanted to have there be like a scene button or like a scene within the app, you can create that there too. So then that way, again, you can either tap that within your app, or you can say, hey, Alexa, set entertained scene, and then she can do exactly what you want to happen to the shades, to the lights, to your thermostat, to your audio, to your ceiling fan. All of those different things can be controlled just through the app, through the Lutron app. And then, we also have schedules. So those are really useful because, again, when we talk about operating versus automating our space, we want our house to work and function in just really in step with like how we're living in the space. So, at the end of the day, when we're done working, the last thing, again, you want to do is have to go around, flip a bunch of things on, close a bunch of windows, just go around, because that's just again, kind of annoying to do. It's not entirely necessary when you can add that layer of automation. So even as far as like safety and security, like lights are such a deterrent to theft. You can, when you're programming within, system dependent, but when you're programming in general, it knows where you live. So based on like sunset, sunrise, you can have things automate in that way. So creating a schedule. I know at my house, I have my porch lights and then I have string lights out in the backyard. Both of those come on at sunset and then they turn off at 10 p.m. And so that's really nice because, if anybody were to come up to the front door, like they're not standing in the dark. Especially like I know that we typically like entertain, like we have friends over. They're not like, and I keep my house like Fort Knox. So of course the door is locked. If somebody's coming over, they've got to knock because they're not getting in. So, being able to have it be more comfortable even for them with that porch light being on makes that nice and easy. And then again, just having it automatically turn off at nighttime is just an easy, nice thing to do because I don't have to worry about, oh man, I left those lights on again. Like they just turn off. And, you think about, again, having there be schedules, even maybe for like a nighttime routine that your lights on your main floor maybe go to a certain percentage at your bedtime during Monday to Friday or Monday to Thursday. And then, maybe your bedroom lamps turn on to 20% and your bathroom lights turn on. And then 30 minutes later, your main floor lights turn off. And, just having those things kind of like work and just be automated are really nice. I actually heard a fun story the one time of one of the guys that I worked with in my previous role. He has a dog, and for shades on a schedule for him, he had at sunset, the shades would close. Oh, sorry.
All good.
The shades would close to, I talk with my hands way too much. The shades would close to 50% at sunset. So his dog could still see out. And then like 15 minutes after, they would close to like 20%. And then like an hour after, it would like fully close. He was like, you don't need to see what's out there when it's dark, Yeah. But then that way, like if his dog still wanted to look outside, like she still had the capacity to do that. And then another cool thing about the app is there's a feature called geofencing. So I think that this is a feature, especially just being a young woman, that I find really impactful, because what that means is whenever you get within a certain range of your home, you can have certain lights come on. So that way, you're never walking into a dark house. You're always walking into a nice warm home. And I think that that's just a cool thing, like just for safety and security in general, especially if you live by yourself or, just if you're walking in and you have maybe like a bunch of groceries. I know I'm the type that I do no second trips. Like if I'm
15 bags an arm.
Yeah, I'm like losing circulation. And like if I'm doing that, like I definitely don't want to run the risk of tripping over anything. So knowing that I'm walking in and certain lights are coming on, almost like a pathway to some degree, is a really nice factor too. Yeah. So
that was a huge reason why I chose Lutron is because of that feature. Mm-hmm. I know I mentioned earlier, but on my street, nobody leaves their lights on, or they left them on and never turned them off. So now the lights are burnt out. Mm-hmm. So I've told all my neighbors, hey, buy this Lutron dimmer and you're good to go. Hey, you can automate it. But they haven't listened to me yet. So you turn into my street. My house is the blinding light in the middle of all the other houses because my driveway lights are on. They stay on to a certain time. My porch lights turn on at sunset. My foyer light turns on at sunset. So I can automate that. And then at a certain time, I actually have, you can make adjustments like to where it's off by maybe within a 30-minute time frame, it'll turn on or off. Mm-hmm. Even for things like vacations, you can set those scenes as well. So from a safety perspective, when you're away from home, you can still make it look like you're there.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And I mean, we have a feature called Home Away for that too, which is what you were just kind of talking about. So if anybody was home aloneing your house and lurking and being creepy and being like, are they just on a regular schedule? With the Home Away feature, it randomizes some of those lights to appear as if you're home. And like I said, lighting is such a big deterrent to theft. So being able to have that kind of like act as a safety net. And then again, if you tie in automated shades to that too, maybe you have your shades open to 50% during the day and then close right before sunset or something like that. Yep. So, not only are the lights being affected, but also now the shades are tied into that too. So now it really looks like somebody's home.
And I think we've seen this with a shift for a lot of folks after COVID going to remote work. Mm-hmm. And I have a ton of clients that have 2 homes, right? And so they've got one that's, near the headquarters of whatever, mega corporation that they work for and so on and so forth. And then they've got a home here as well. And so they might spend 4 months, right, at this other residence. And so, you start thinking about, well, I want to be able to control not only the lights, but I also want to be able to see what's going on. Mm-hmm. And so if you were to integrate that with, say, some security cameras, you now have a lot of presence, and you still have that, again, going to maybe some automated locks. Well, now you can have a phone call and you can turn the lights on. You can have a, technician or somebody come out to the house. Even if you're not there, you can let somebody come in and, the maid can come in and she can clean, or, the dog walker can come walk your dogs, or whatever you need them to do. And you can have that peace of mind knowing that all of that stuff is in control in your hands and in your power, even though you might be, right, 2,000 miles away on the other side of the country, legitimately, right? Because that's, what your work life and how that situation has to work out. So
yeah, I think that, and even too, I got a call today about somebody wanting to do an Airbnb and have smart lighting in that space.
Yes.
Like that's a huge thing I've been hearing recently, because same thing, like you can have the lights turn off when the people leave. Hey, checkout's at 10. Okay, cool. Now all my lights are turning off. I'm not wasting that energy. If there were a bunch of spring breakers in this house and they left every single thing on, that you can at least turn that off. And then when the cleaning people come in, they leave things on. Maybe you turn it off after that too. Like it makes life so much easier, and being able to either have that be scheduled or just open up your app and be like, okay, maybe I have a scene that's all off. Tap. Now you're done. Mm-hmm. Don't even need to think about it.
Yeah.
Well, and we just did a RadioRA 3 job for a client who has kind of a long, wide house, right? And more than it was tall. And the reason I mention it is because if he gets home late, and he goes to bed at, let's say, 9, 10 o'clock at night, something along those lines. If he forgot to leave a light on, say at the garage hall, that's like a 10-minute walk. It's a big house, right? So admittedly, like we should all have such problems, but It is legitimate, right? Like I don't want to spend 10 minutes walking back and forth because I forgot to leave a light on. It's like, is there not a better way? And it's like, yes, there is a better way.
Oh yeah. Even
get Lutron.
Yeah, true. Even going back to what Mark said, like if, being able to have some little things by doors, make that really easy, because I was the one before all family vacations that was running around turning all of the lights off, had some of these systems been, around and a little bit more, well, we also always rented, but had the people that owned the houses, military families, so it didn't make sense to buy, but had they have had those systems, I would have saved so many steps as a child and so many staircases climbed, just running around, turning everything light, but making sure that one lamp in the living room was on, so just being able to have a little remote or have a keypad or something right next to the front door, or, maybe, oh man, we're 10 minutes outside of town. Okay, let me open up the app and make sure that the lights are off. Yeah. Like that just really helps from the peace of mind perspective.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I did want to bring up earlier, you mentioned that you're not a second tripper when you're carrying your groceries. So one of the other cool things that I just wanted to bring up is the occupancy sensor. So I'm the same type of person, and I'm also the same type of person with my laundry. Like I'm going to pull everything out of that dryer, and I don't care. I'm making one trip, or maybe I'm carrying my dirty clothes to the laundry room. Well, I don't want to have to like fumble around with my elbow to try to turn something on, right? So I for most of my clients in closets, laundry, pantry, I'll put an occupancy sensor, which maybe you can go into a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah. So I think that those are one of the most kind of like low key products that we have, I guess, if that makes sense, because, you know, we're talking about dimmers and keypads and shades and all of these things, but occupancy sensors are so handy when we talk about some of those different applications. So being able to walk into a space and have your lights automatically come on after, you know, you designate the timeout. So whether it's 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, your lights just automatically turn off. You know, that's a really cool thing. So if your hands are full, maybe it's a laundry room with your, you know, all of your laundry, or a mud room, you know, maybe it's like the space right before you get into your kitchen or something coming from the garage. Being able to have a light in there that it'll just automatically come on is a really, really useful thing. And even like a little plug, I have one, I have a dimmer and an occupancy sensor in my bathroom.
Yep.
And that's really nice because, you know, after a certain time, you know, I normally go to bed at 10, but so after 10, if it senses motion, it'll only come on to like 10%. But then after, you know, like 6:30, it'll come on to like 40%. So, it's nice because one, I don't have to worry about ever turning that light on, but also two, if I wake up in the middle of the night, you know, I don't have to worry about like being blinded by the lights coming on. And that's something, it was funny, we were talking about just before we got started about things that, you know, now after you live with it, you're kind of ruined and you're like, oh my gosh, how is this possible? Like anytime I travel and stay at hotels and they don't have an occupancy sensor, or if they do and it's just full 100, like it is terrifying. So it just makes me really happy to come home and I'm like, oh wow, my dimmer sensor in my bathroom. Who would have thought?
It makes such a big difference. But
honestly, I'm gonna go buy one tonight specifically for that, because I've had to do the whole, you know, hold my hand over an eye pirate thing at night, because my wife will turn that on and I'll be like, you know, walking back out of the bathroom into complete darkness. It's like, all right, now I can see.
You're like seeing spots.
Well, we have one in the closet. That's probably my favorite, quite honestly, because we historically would just never remember to turn off that light. And so, you know, you think about it, and especially for like little kids, you know, you put that, if you have like, you know, each kid has their own bedroom and they've got a little closet and a bathroom, and like the way they build homes down here, at least in Nashville and some of these surrounding areas, it's not uncommon to see that there's like a little suite the whole time, right, for every member of the family. And so, yeah, of course, you put a little occupancy sensor inside those closets, inside those bathrooms, and now you don't even have to think about it. So how much easier, and how many steps did you save? And so you think about that. All right, I've saved 3 or 4 steps here in the morning, right? And then I save another 3 or 4 steps when I get into the kitchen. And then I save another 3 or 4 or 5 steps by the time I'm leaving the house. And so what used to be a routine of 15 or 20 steps every single day, where I'm going click, 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 is now automatically done for you. And you can just live your life, do what you need to do, and focus on what you need to focus on. Crazy. And not have to like, like, what is this, 2024? Like, what do we, technology? Like, what do we, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what are some of the things that Lutron does? We've talked a lot about, you know, some of the different platforms. We've talked a little bit about shades. What are some of the other things that Lutron can integrate with or work well with that has kind of happened over the last, say, you know, maybe 5 or 10 years? Because you mentioned, you know, that it could control audio. So like, I know there's a Sonos integration. You mentioned Alexa. Are there any other, like, you know, really cool call outs that you guys have seen more recently?
Yeah, I would say one of our biggest integrations, we came out with this back in, I want to say 2020 or 2021 when we created this partnership, is with Ring. So, you know, as I've mentioned a couple times, like lighting is a big deterrent to theft. People are getting Ring doorbells for so many reasons, like safety, security, and convenience. So now being able to parlay that with your lighting becomes a really powerful story and a really nice thing for people. So, you know, now if somebody comes up to your door, you can have your porch light automatically come on.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that just kind of like helps with, I know porch pirates are a big thing right now. Like if I've never stolen anything, but if I were to try and go up and steal a package and a light comes on, I'm probably like, oh, sorry, dinner party at the wrong house, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
This was my house.
Yeah. So, being able to have all of, have that work together is a really strong thing. And whether it's your porch light, whether you're doing porch light and another light too, that's just, I would say that that's another strong one. Sonos, you mentioned, as far as audio, Alexa is, I feel like everybody and their mother has an Alexa.
Mm-hmm.
And like another cool thing, actually, like Apple HomeKit, when they were launching the Apple Watch, they actually asked Lutron if they could showcase the Lutron app. So there's like a picture of them launching the Apple Watch, and there's the little Lutron app on it, which I think is really cool because, somebody referred to us like a year ago as kind of like a silent giant. And I think that that's so true because you think about just how prominent we are in so many spaces. But, like a phrase that we hear all the time is it just works.
Right.
Like you never really need to worry about what company it is because, every time you go in, you tap the dimmer, you tap the keypad, you tap the remote to open your shade, it's going to function. And so being able to have companies like that come to us and be like, hey, like, you are great at what you do. Can we showcase, like, we know you're not going anywhere anytime soon. Can we showcase your app on our new product launch? Like that's a really cool thing.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned the Ring integration and I just thought of this, and so I'll share a story from my grandparents back in Michigan were both deaf, and they had a doorbell that was tied to a light switch. And so what would happen is when you'd ring the bell, this light would come on because they were able to actually see. They weren't able to hear any kind of a bell or anything like that. And I just think those extra integrations like you're talking about, you guys do such an amazing job. Silent Giant is amazing. Like that is such a apt way of putting it. And so I'm just thinking now of like anyone who has any type of a handicap that may benefit from the use of automation. And, that's something that we just don't have that conversation enough about how beneficial that is to making somebody's life so much easier. And you guys are able to do that in such a amazing way because, and I don't want to, overstep the bounds here, but it's kind of like from basic, just regular light switches to dimmer switches, to smart switches, to designer switches, to panelized lighting and everything in between. It's like Lutron has it just works solution for you at every, no matter who you are, whether it's this or that, whether you have all the money in the world, or you don't have, it doesn't matter. Like Lutron has a solution for you and for your home. It's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And kind of going off of the safety and security, I know that some people like in the world of like Raw 3 and Homeworks, what they'll do too is like if their security system has been breached or if it's tied to maybe like a life alert or something like that. Like if somebody falls, then you can have like your front porch light start flashing, or you can have like your whole house start flashing. Like if an emergency vehicle is driving down your street and they're trying to be like, okay, what's the house number? Like if yours is the house that's flashing, like that'll help them get to you a lot faster, So even just some things like that we're able to do, I think are really cool. And you mentioned something else and I forgot the second thing I was going to say.
That's all right. I think it goes back to the automation concept and there's thinking differently about what the lights are and going back to that purpose, right? Mm-hmm. And once you understand what the purpose is, once you understand what that is, and that means you got to be personal. That means that you do have to open up a little bit, maybe to your integrator, to your designer, to your Lutron rep to make sure that, hey, like these are the things that we actually do. This is how we actually live. And these are the things that are really important to us. And this is how we can make that work. And if you don't have that initial conversation, then it's going to be really, really difficult, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to put really good technology in the home that makes your life better because again, it just goes back to it. Good design follows purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I think even when, for the people that, maybe you're going to somebody's house to talk about networking, talk about audio, talk about TVs, whatever it may be, like if you can introduce lighting and help them understand really like why it's valuable, even if they're just like I'm fine with my switches, but maybe let's do it in this one space. Like it's such an addicting category that once you live with it, it's going to naturally grow because you're going to understand the value. So, whether it is that single space, whether it's 5 rooms, whether it's a first floor, whether it's a whole house, like Lutron really does have any and all of those solutions for those people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, listen, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a ton of fun, and I just want to say a quick thank you to all of you guys for listening and for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you have questions, we'd love to hear from you. Check us out at thesoundofdesign.com, and we will see you guys on the next episode.
Hey, thanks, guys.